Well, good morning. It's exciting to be here, and frankly, a little intimidating too, but I really appreciate this opportunity, and I'd like to just start out saying I don't consider myself a real expert at innovation, but I think we've had an interesting journey over the last 4 years since I've been put into this role. And I'd like to talk to you about that journey, and hopefully some tidbits of that journey will be helpful to you if you're considering moving in a similar direction with your organizations. So the history of Medtronic, Medtronic is a very innovative company. Earl Bakken's our founder. A little over 50 years ago, it started out in the garage, and it's kind of an interesting story, and I won't take much time on it, but Earl he was an engineer, and he was starting to fix hospital equipment for some physicians for a nearby hospital. It was just as a favor to the physicians because they couldn't really find anybody else to do it. And Earl saw an unmet need as he was doing this, realized he had the skills for that, and Medtronic was really born out of this, and the whole implantable medical device industry really was born from this. Medtronic, this is a little snapshot of Medtronic, but you can see 9,000 plus scientists and engineers, over 2,000 patents in FY12, 23,000 in total for the company. So it's a very innovative company around our products, our therapies, and our devices. From an IT perspective, though, we started thinking, well, how can IT be better plugged into this innovation cycle? Isn't there unique skills that IT could bring to the table that would really help Medtronic? IT, like a lot of companies, was seen as a little bit more of a service organization. So we thought, well, there's something we can do here. And it was about that time that our CIO at the time tapped me on the shoulder, and I was leading our customer relationship management program, a program I had started up at Medtronic. And he said, would you be willing to now start up an innovation team within IT at Medtronic? We don't know what that means. We're not quite sure where it should even go or what types of things you should work on. We want you to help figure that out. So the cool thing of the job was it was a blank slate, and it was really an opportunity to create something new from scratch. The bad thing was I went from a large organization down to an army of one at the beginning. It was really challenging when you want to delegate something and you turn around and there's nobody there, so you start realizing I got to relearn how to do all these things that I've kind of forgotten how to do. But it was a fun opportunity. And at the very beginning, I had the opportunity also to go out and spend a couple months in the field with our sales reps, in the hospitals, watching our implants of our devices, talking to physicians, talking to nurses. And that gave me some real insights for where I wanted to take this innovation team at this point. 3 of us, me, myself, and I, was the team. But and I really felt like I didn't want to compete internally with our IT organization. We had really great engineers in IT, and I didn't think there was a real value for me to try to bring storage innovation or try to bring mobility innovation or best practices. I wanted to make it outward facing. I saw a real need in our hospitals and thought this role could be more about how do we make it easier for our customers to do business with Medtronic. So that was the direction we started with this new innovation team. So you'll recognize, hopefully, the picture from Field of Dreams. Build it and they will come. And actually, we found out there was a fair amount of truth to this. We developed over time this hospital of the future type of concept, which is a little bit of a misnomer. It's really more of an OR of the future. And as we were building out these ideas and these concepts, I had them all on PowerPoints. I was shopping them around. I was talking to different leaders about these ideas and where it could go and what the value might be. They were all very polite. They all nodded and smiled, and I never heard back from them. It was becoming a little bit of a frustrating role. About that time, Michael Hedges, many of you know him, my boss, said, Paul, we got to do something. You can't keep showing up with these PowerPoints. In fact, I think his exact words, if I see that PowerPoint one more time, I'm going to kill you. But so he was able to scrape up a little bit of funding out of IT for me and said, let's just build something. So I was able to go down to our Bakken Education Center, which is where all of our customers come in within our Mounds View campus, and was able and asked them, I said, would you be willing to give me one of your rooms? And we had a simulator in one of those rooms where our sales reps are able to practice how you place leads. So for a pacemaker or a defibrillator or a neurostimulator, there's leads that connected into the heart or other places in the body to deliver the therapies. So the stimulator looks like a real patient on a bed, and it has the beginnings of a look of an OR. So I said, would you give me this room, and we would like to bring some other innovative concepts into this room. And they said, well, how about we give you 3 rooms and do what you want. We need to bring some real wow factor into this innovation or into this education center. So that gave us a place But I think the other piece of the story was the funding. I had just enough funding to basically come in and just do a little teeny bit, and we had a lot of really ideas that we wanted to build out, and that's where our partners started coming to the table. And I think one of the first lessons around innovation for us is don't try to do it alone. So Cisco was the first one who came to the table. They were a great partner for us. They were very open and willing to work with us. They gave us equipment, they gave us time, they gave us energy to say, let's build out something here, we'd like to work with you on that. And once I had Cisco there, all the others started coming, and then I was able to work with IBM and Microsoft and several other firms. At the end, some of them were knocking on my door saying, Paul, you're building this hospital of the future. Why haven't you come to us? What can we do? What can we give you? So it was really kind of a fun opportunity. So when I had X amount of funding from Michael, I had 8X funding coming from our strategic partners. So at that point, we pulled down the curtains, and we said, let's just build this thing out. We didn't really involve the businesses. We didn't involve legal. We didn't involve regulatory. We just said, we're going to try this, and this is like one of these career-breaking moves, So we built it out, and then 3 months later, we opened the curtains up, and we invited our leadership in to see what we had built. And that was kind of that make-or-break moment, and I'm still here. I'm talking to you guys, so it went fairly well, I guess. And instead of just trying to describe to you what this whole Hospital of the Future concept was, I thought it might be kind of fun to go ahead and take you live to our Mounds View Innovation Center and show you at least one of the rooms that we're working with. So, hey, good morning, Renee. So this is Renee Schneider. She was my employee number 1 on my innovation team. So she was my first follower, as many people called her. And this also gives you a little bit of a hint what it's like to be on my innovation team. You can get a call wee hours of morning saying, hey, how do you feel about showing up and helping me give a virtual tour to a big group of people this morning? And here they are, and thanks again to Cisco for helping me get this whole set up from a connection standpoint. So here we have you in our OR, and you can kind of see some of the things we're doing here. So what I'd like to do is give you just a little bit of history about the Hospital of the Future, because it's not just the technology. And I think the other thing that we realized is the technology had a lot of wow factor, and there's some pieces that you don't see here, but really jump out at you and really get our customers very interested. But what's really more important is the story behind the technology. And I think it's that story that keeps it from getting boring. And so, when I was out in the field and we had those chances to really look at everything, what you see in the business models, and I'll take just a couple minutes here because it might be helpful to you to understand why we built what we built. Today, our sales reps, which is a little bit of a misnomer, they're very highly trained professionals, not just from a sales perspective, but from a clinical perspective. They understand our devices, they understand how those devices are implanted, they know how to program our implantable devices. So many of our devices are smart devices. They're small computers inside your body, and they can be programmed very specifically for each individual patient so that they really deliver therapies in a very unique way. That all takes place during the implant of our devices. So a sales rep will show up with his bag full of devices. It's not unusual for them to have over $1 million worth of inventory in the trunk of their car, and they're there through the whole implant of our devices. And the main reason that this happens is not only because of the expertise that we bring to the table, but it's also because the main decision maker around which medical device gets implanted historically has been the physician. But that's been changing over time, and that's something we started realizing. Not only is there a whole series of very manual processes that the sales rep takes care of during the implant, he's taking care of paperwork, he's recording information, he's making sure the replenishment takes place of the inventory, he's making sure certain types of forms are filled out for device registration, patient billing, hospital billing, electronic health record integration. All these things are taking place all during the implant. And it's becoming to the point where the physician's really not the only decision maker. This is starting to move up to the C-suite. Larger decisions are being made in a much grander style, where a hospital administrator may say, I'll get 70 or 60% of implants from you or your devices for certain types of prices. And now the physician's really beholden to those decisions that were made at that C-suite level. In addition, we're seeing regulatory issues coming in where FDA and other bodies are starting to put restrictions on how many reps can be within the OR, or should reps even be in the OR, and why is industry in there helping with an implant of the device or helping to program those devices. And we already kind of know this is not a sustainable sales model within the U.S., but it's definitely not a sales model that we can reproduce out in emerging markets or other countries. So I think there was a lot of reasons we thought, what if we use technology-based solutions as a way to replace these very manual services and really start automating that OR? And that gives us options and gives us choices. And that's really what the story was behind the Hospital of the Future. So here, and thanks Renee and Tom for sitting there so patiently as I described that whole thing. You can see this mock-up. That's the simulator that I mentioned to you right there that Renee's standing next to. I'm going to show you some other components of it, just kind of briefly walk you through it so you get a feel of some of the things we built out. There's some things I can't show you because of the IP around it and where Medtronic's thinking about going with this, but I thought I'd at least give you a glimpse of it. So, Renee, let's go to the inventory management. I think I'd like to show that next. So you can see here, we're using inventory management, smart shelf technology. I think the other thing we did is we didn't try to create a bunch of things ourselves. We decided to go ahead and find who we thought were the best of breed strategic partners out there and then really stitch those together in a way that doesn't exist today in the industry. So here we're looking at RFID, something that's been used for 20, 30 years by Walmart and other companies. But healthcare hasn't really adopted it yet. I think it's just now getting to that tipping point. But if I can automate the inventory, for example, I can now not rely on my rep having to be there to bring the inventory in for every implant. Now we can tie this to the schedule and everything that's going on with the implants. With this RFID Smart Shelf technology, not only can I manage what's there, but it also changes my relationship with the hospital around the inventory. I could do vendor managed inventory. I can go ahead and automatically replenish inventory or guarantee certain part levels of devices there. I can not only manage it within the storage areas of the hospital, but that's a mobile cart right next to Renee. That could be rolled right into the OR, and we can keep track of exactly what's in the OR ready for the day's worth of implants. So that's just part of the overall story. But it's not all just about technology, too. We really started looking at other industries and say, well, what can we borrow from other industries? Sometimes things as simple as, packaging. Today, in fact, Renee, if you don't mind, let's pull out one of the heart valves, and we'll show them some of the packaging changes we made together. So here's a heart valve package. So this is a new packaging that we came up with, and we're now color coding it. We're making it much easier to read. If we pulled out an old one, you wouldn't even be able to see the size of that valve, and yet the right decision to make when that nurse is running there to grab another valve for the physician is to get the right size. So make it easy to find. Borrow from retail and what they do as they help you find things easier and help you buy those things. Let's make it easier for them to find the right product. That's not only good for, I think, Medtronic, but it also would be good for reducing the amount of errors and make sure the right device makes it into the right implant for the right patient. So those are just a few of the things that we're doing here, and that's just the one small piece of this overall story around the inventory. Let's go back to the patient, if you don't mind, Renee. So back at the implant, a lot of things take place at the implant. I mentioned, that our sales rep is usually there, making sure the right leads are being used, really helping the physician. Many times, our rep has seen more implants than the physician themselves. So when you're doing an implant of a device, you're using fluoro images. It's a 2D imaging system that helps you see exactly where you're at in the heart, if we're talking about a cardiovascular device, and where you're placing that lead. And so, it takes a lot of training to figure out how to navigate that correctly. So what we thought is, we do bring a real value of our sales rep being there, but we could also do that virtually. And this is where Cisco really came into play with us. In fact, this little cart back here behind Renee, and you can see Tom, another member of my team, on the other side of the screen. I don't think he can hear us now, but if you can hear us, Tom, wave. He's nodding. He doesn't follow instructions well, but at least he heard us. The other challenge with innovation team members, they're all very independent, spirited people, But this idea that we could use telemedicine, and this is a very unique cart. When this was built by Cisco, nothing existed like it before. This is a one of a kind, and we're really thankful that they were able to put their engineers together to really come up with something. Since then, I think with their Tandberg acquisition, they have much more of a standard now cart that can be used at hospitals, and this is a real direction. We like to think that we, working with Cisco, have helped kind of break open some new areas and new markets for this type of solution. But now here, you can see Tom, thanks Renee for doing that. He's able to be in a remote location. He can see those fluoro images. He can see the programming. of the device, and we're even doing some things around remotely programming the devices from those remote locations. He can see everything he needs to see, but this is more than just Medtronic. That's just one opportunity. Proctoring is a huge issue too for us. A new therapy, a new device needs proctoring, and quite often you train up a very experienced physician who's usually a little bit later in his career because of his experience. And if you have a new therapy coming in, a physician needs to have several practices, sometimes maybe even a dozen practices with a proctoring physician there with him. So these very senior proctoring physicians, we fly them all over the world to train up new physicians. They stand there all day in the OR, in lead, because the fluoro images, you have to be protected against it. It's very hard on your back over time, and many of our surgeons have back problems over their career because of this. We can use these same technologies, so now that proctoring physician can do this out of his own office or from a small location, nearby his office. And many of the physicians have said, you know what, I feel like I have better control over what's going on in that surgery because I can control the cameras, I can see everything I need to see. I even have better views into what's going on because of the cameras that we can use than here. So there's some real practical, opportunities that we can use this for. In addition to proctoring, we can extend the reach of physicians from Western markets into emerging markets. We can help train up new physicians in other markets. We can let them remote in. So this big screen behind Renee, it's amazing how she can just read my mind. She always knows exactly where I'm going before I even ask her, so thanks, Renee. But behind the scenes, we can see our perfusion lab, a surgery going on back there. And this ability that you can go in the middle of your own surgery, you can remote into another surgery, help them through a very difficult case, and then come back into your own surgery without unscrubbing, without leaving, without going someplace else. So there's some real advantages with some of these technologies, these solutions. There's a ton of automations taking place here, capturing the data once, getting that data into all those multiple forms. Our goal is to get rid of all the paperwork at the point of implant, and we have a lot of those automations working here. So I think what we learned by building this out, that there was a real power in building a working prototype like this. In fact, we received so much traction from this that we never received from all the PowerPoints, all the white papers, all the case studies that we had created before that. When we let leadership in and they saw this and they walked through the 3 different rooms, the response was overwhelming. In fact, the president of our CRDM business, when he came through, he dictated, any customer who comes in for a visit from now on will receive a tour of the hospital of the future. And for a couple of years, I became a professional tour guide. I felt like I should have a jacket and a cane, and a hat, but it was a great opportunity for us. And because of what we built here, we've had both U.S. senators in. We had the chief technology officer from the Obama White House here. We had Dr. Hamburg, the head of the FDA, in. We had multiple congressmen, multiple dignitaries from many different countries, all here, and this has become a standard piece of a tour. In fact, when Omar Ishrak joined Medtronic, his very first day, he made his opening remarks to the overall Medtronic facilities, introducing himself and who he was and what he was going to do at Medtronic. His second stop, I was asked to give him a tour of the hospital of the future. Now that was scary, I would tell you. Very friendly guy on stage, and he's a great guy, but boy, he is all business. He came into that thing. I had never answered so many questions in 1 hour in my life. He was down to the details. He wanted to know about this, and why did we do this, and how did we do this, what's the technology behind this. I was sweating bullets by the end of that tour. But it just tells you, I think, though, the power of building out something real for people to see. I think what it does, it changes intellectual response that you might get from a PowerPoint, easy to poke holes in a PowerPoint, to an emotional response. You walk in, you see it, and it completely changes your overall perceptions. You see it there, and you see it working, and you kind of drop some of those very academic arguments that you might start having and start opening your mind and thinking about what's really possible. I had several leaders come to me and say, you know what, I never really believed in what you told me when you showed me the PowerPoint. I get it now. This was a real epiphany for me, and I'm sorry, I'll do whatever I can now to support what you're trying to do. Now, I think there's some real value to building out an innovation center, and I don't think I'll show you much more of the hospital of the future. Just know there's a lot more there, and if you have a high interest and you're ready and willing to sign an NDA, we'd be more than happy to bring you in, give you a full tour of the hospital of the future and show you some of the things that we're doing there. And thanks, Renee, thanks, Tom. I really appreciate you guys coming in. and helping me showcase this for the group here. So appreciate it. So thanks. So I think there's real values to building out an innovation center. And if you're considering starting an innovation team out of your IT organization or any other organization, I think really consider also the power of some sort of showcase, some sort of innovation center, or at least some prototypes of the types of solutions and ideas that you're thinking about. You know, some of the values that we saw by building out our innovation center, I kind of mentioned, you know, the change in attitude, that's a huge one. But it also really helped, I think, change the perceptions of Medtronic about the IT organization. It moved us from being seen as strictly just a service organization to being seen as something much bigger. So suddenly they saw us, well, wow, you guys are involved in thinking about how to start looking at the business differently. How can we maybe look at IT as a way to find new revenue for Medtronic, or to start transforming the way we do our business at Medtronic? So that was a huge undertaking. We also heard from our physicians coming in that it started changing their perceptions of Medtronic itself. They started seeing us as not just great innovators around our products and our therapies, but they were also really intrigued that we were thinking about the services and thinking about how those devices get implanted and how we can change the environment within their own hospitals. And as physicians started coming through, the other thing that we found was it was a great validation. They started telling us, wow, we really like this idea. Or they might say, this idea, that's funny, that's interesting, but probably not that practical for us. So really over time, we've given over 1,000 tours over the last 3 to 4 years of this Hospital of the Future. We've had a ton of feedback that you couldn't pay money for. These physicians, these hospital administrators are all coming through, and they start freely sharing their ideas because you have put them into an innovative setting. And that kind of makes them very open, not only to give you feedback about what you've done, but start sharing their own ideas about, hey, have you ever thought about maybe doing this? Or if you took this solution and did this to it, that would be really great. So we found that we had a real now feeder pool coming into us around other ideas and things that we could consider. That was huge in itself. In addition, you know, I think it really opened up, because now we're looking at the economics. We're building something that we know can literally save hospitals millions of dollars around their implant centers. The C-suite, the hospital administrators, have become regular visitors now, and they come through and see this Hospital of the Future concept. Many of our sales reps and our leaders have told us this Hospital of the Future alone has opened up the doors to the C-suite like nothing else that we've had at Medtronic over the last 20 years. And now we're getting access in to talk to those hospital administrators, and that's really where the decisions are starting to be made. So those are all some of the benefits we saw from our journey. You know, it'll be different for you maybe for different industries, but I think, you know, they're intangible. They're hard to put an ROI around this, but I think there's real value here that's worth considering. I grew up in Michigan, so I always think cars. I worked my way through school in the factories, actually, of welding and making cars. And I loved car shows. Most guys in Michigan, and girls too, I guess, love cars. But I love the car shows, and I love the concept cars. They were just so exciting to me. You'd see these things, and you know, they're just pieces of art and engineering all brought together. And it was always frustrating to me because you'd always wonder, wow, these things are so fabulous. Why don't they ever make these cars? And I think as I had this role, I started to realize that there's real value in some of the things we just talked about building out these concepts. But it is to try really novel ideas out on the public to see how they respond to it, see which concepts catch on. Quite often, they're just not practical to build some of these cars in real production. But there's concepts and pieces of those cars that actually come to fruition over time. And we kind of found the same thing with our Hospital of the Future. I think, you know, there's real ideas and concepts that we're driving forward toward commercialization with this concept. But already 2 and maybe even 3 new businesses have started up within Medtronic outside the U.S. based on what was seen in our Hospital of the Future. So as those leaders came through, they took components of it and they said, what if we did this and this? And they put a twist on it that we weren't thinking about, and they started new businesses that are actually starting to already create new revenue for Medtronic. So I think the value is quite often of these concept cars or these innovation centers is what comes from it. And I think that's also something to be considered here. I love this slide. And I think the other thing that we kind of realized in our journey is there's a real reason to move. There's real value in movement. Even if you don't quite know where you're going, it's worth jumping on that train and starting to go, because you're going to learn things on the way. It's going to open up opportunities that you didn't even realize might exist. If you sit and think and draw it out and come up with those PowerPoints and those case studies, quite often you won't get those same learnings or those same opportunities. So those opportunities that took place in Europe that I just mentioned, was one thing that came out of this for us as those new businesses popped up. Other things, there's a real, I think, discipline around innovation, and you're not going to learn that discipline unless you practice it. So for us, as we started building now a small team, and you saw a couple of those members on the team there on video a few minutes ago, we started realizing we were pretty good about whipping up new ideas in the ideation phase, but there was a lot we needed to do as ideas started actually moving forward. And so over time, we started putting together much more of a process around innovation. So early hunting and gathering, as it moved into something that we thought was worthwhile, we might build up a working prototype. Then from a working prototype, we would get it ready to take out to a hospital as a true pilot, and we'd move it forward there. We started putting very formal gates in place for my own team. I guess I shouldn't do that. That would then tell us which ones should we move forward, because we have limited resources as a small team, and so we have to be really judicious about which ideas that we actually invest in to move forward. So we want to pick the ones that have the most opportunity to bring real value to Medtronic. Understanding our business is huge for us, and understanding, in my case, healthcare is huge for us also, because the better we can understand what's going out there in the marketplace and what the trends are and what's happening, the better we can try to really drive innovation in areas that will have hopefully a real benefit to us in the company. So I would really, again, if you're considering an innovation team, I know a lot of companies are thinking about this right now, the idea of just getting it started is huge. And for us, they were really smart when they said, let's start out with an army of one, and then we'll slowly build it over time as they start having more and more success. And frankly, if they gave me 10 headcounts right at the very beginning, I wouldn't have even made good decisions of where to put those headcounts. Because it's over time that I started realizing where and what types of skills I need now as we're moving this forward. As things start moving toward commercialization, we needed to start building up skills around business development, business modeling, creating 5-year business plans, ROI analysis, market analysis. These are all things that are necessary for us to take a concept, an idea that has a successful pilot, and actually get it packaged up in a way that the business is ready to take it on as a potential new commercialization project. I think some of that I just mentioned is this hard work that Edison talked about. And I think, for me, this job has been the most fun job I've had in my career, but it's also been simply the most challenging job I've ever had. Trying to drive a new idea at a big company is a huge undertaking. And there's a lot more internal sales than I ever expected when I took on this role. I felt like I was no longer an IT person. I suddenly was becoming a salesperson. I never thought I'd become a salesperson, but here I was. No white shoes or anything though, but anyway. Sean and I used to joke about that all the time, that I was slowly becoming the salesperson, and as an IT professional and having various backgrounds, it just wasn't the direction I thought it would go, but it's so necessary. You have to be able to sell your ideas, you have to be able to package those ideas, and you have to really be able to get the interest of your leadership to show them why they should consider what you're talking about. There's a lot of competing pressures out there, and especially if you're driving a real transformational innovation at a company, a business model innovation, for example, that's a huge change for a company, and you really have to be able to drive that forward in different ways than you might expect. So we really started building up the team to really help us move these things forward, and a lot of the work is behind the scenes around that analysis and those business cases that we have to create that goes with those ideas. Kind of coming back to my Michigan story, there's a real tendency for a company to always grind out what they've always ground out. And so you take some of those concept cars, I'll use that as an example, it's safer for me to stick with a different industry. Sometimes they would say, hey, we are going to build this concept car, and I remember that as a kid, and I get so excited, cool, they're finally going to build one of these things. And you'd wait 3 or 4 years as it went through the production, and the market analysis and everything. And finally it would come out, and literally the only thing to me that seemed that was still there from that original car was the name. It looked like every other car they ever made. And I think that's very typical for every company. is there's a real tendency to do what you know best. And your hierarchies, your systems, your processes, your teams, your groups are all been set up to become as efficient as you can for what your company does. So to completely change and move into a different direction, there's a real tendency to try to pull it back in and make it like everything else. I had a chance to sit with the chief technology officer from General Motors OnStar for a couple days. Same issues he had there. He said for OnStar, they actually had to take him and move him to a completely different building on the other side of Detroit, way away from General Motors mothership headquarters, and they were able to work in complete isolation and in complete independence to create that new business model for General Motors. And even after they were making large amounts of revenue, they did bring them back into the mothership, and the first thing they tried to do was squash them and get rid of them because they weren't a car. And so there's a real tendency for companies to do this, and I think something for us to be aware of. So I think for us with Hospital of the Future, for example, put that incubator in place, really figure out ways to give the proper amount of isolation needed to allow a team or a concept or an idea to have a chance to survive. I think that's one of the things that you have to kind of think about. For me, I've always thought of companies. I had a short-term background in cancer research, so I guess this one probably popped out at me more. But to think about a company is like the human body. Everything about that company, everything about the human body is prepared and ready to wipe out anything that's foreign. And really, an innovation team, a new concept, a new innovative idea is going to be seen as something foreign and bad that needs to be wiped out and taken out. So you have to figure out, just like cancer figures out ways to really keep itself undetected by the body's immune systems, I think it's a little bit the same for innovation. That isolation is one piece of it, but also giving yourself a chance to get up something to the critical mass where it becomes large enough and sustainable enough that it's going to be much more difficult for the body company or the human body to wipe it out is an important aspect to think about. Culture is another thing. You have to think about what is the culture of your company, and also I think what type of idea or concept you're trying to drive forward. So for us, give you a little background, I guess, on the slide so you can make some sense of what these strange little alien things are up in the top there. Those are actually fish larvae that have been just recently hatched. And of course, you recognize the elephant. So from a biology standpoint, these two species have completely different population biology strategies. The elephant will put all of its resources and energy into creating one offspring. The gestation period for a baby elephant is a little over 2 years. And when that thing drops out, it's over 3 feet tall, and it's about 280 pounds, and it can run with a herd. So a lot of energy into a fully developed, very mature, very robust offspring. Fish, take a salmon, for example, they can lay up to 7,000 eggs. Actually, about 20 to 30% of those eggs will end up being cannibalized by the adult salmon. So, it just puts them out there into an environment, and it just needs a few of them to survive for another salmon to be able to get to the point of, laying more eggs. Both species have survived a very long time, and they both have completely different strategies. And I think it's the same for companies. What type of company are you? For us, we started realizing, especially with the Hospital of the Future concept, which was a big business model transformation and innovation, and trying to help drive Medtronic into more of a service area, we had to act a little bit more like an elephant. We had to be really putting a lot of that energy and time in fully developing out that concept for it to have a chance to survive and be commercialized. I think maybe if you're a .com or if you're a small startup, you can maybe be a little bit more on the fish side of the equation. You can throw out quick ideas, see which ones stick, which ones start making money, then start putting more resources behind it. There's not as much risk. If you're a high market share within your own discipline, then you might have to be a little bit more like an elephant because you can't threaten your existing market share by making a big mistake in the marketplace. So I think these are things to consider. If it's just an incremental innovation, then I think the fish model is much more appropriate. Quickly try things, fail fast, don't invest a lot of money, see which ones stick, and try all sorts of things. So I think it's just one more aspect that you really should think about, and it made a difference to us, and it really kind of changed the way we had to look at how innovation could be driven at Medtronic. So, you see this, you probably think first thing, don't reinvent the wheel, and I think that's one thing, not invented here is another issue that we see in big companies. You know, how do you, especially coming from an IT organization, how do you work with your product development or your other business areas and be taken and seen seriously? But I think also a lot of companies have a real tendency to drive everything through market analysis, market research, and quite often this is very appropriate. But when I think you're thinking about a transformational innovation, it can really be harmful. For example, you know, Henry Ford, I think, had the quote, "If I had asked them what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse." And I think that quite often is what happens if you go out to the public. You know, Steve Jobs with the iPhone or even the iPad, you know, no one was even envisioning where he was wanting to go. And it wasn't until those products were kind of there that people could react to them. They could never come up with it on their own. It sometimes, you know, takes a bit of a leap of faith to move something forward. So I have a video here that is kind of fun. I think it kind of shows you what it can feel like sometimes to try to drive a transformational innovation at a big company, especially when you're being driven through all the market research.
Thank you for your time and welcome to our focus group. Today we're going to show you an idea and ask for your opinion. This is called a wheel. Now, according to its developers, it'll change the way we work and live. Why? Because it rolls. It can also be added to wagons to make moving a heavy load easier. Your opinions?
If it rolls, that means it could roll away and get lost, right? Or it could roll over your foot. It's the round shape that disturbs me. It's very feminine. I can't imagine any caveman wanting to be seen with that.
I wouldn't. Ugh.
And this added to wagons thing, it sounds very complicated. Is there an easier version?
You know what?
Do you have it in square?
No square.
If there was a square one,
Yeah?
it didn't roll. Then maybe I would think about buying one. Nice try. The wheel.
So be ready for that. Keep a good sense of humor and persistence. But you know, one of the things that I thought might be interesting was, as we built our innovation team, you know, what type of people did we look for? And if you're thinking about doing the same, maybe a few things to consider that worked for us, at least on our journey. You know, I think, first of all, there's a real tendency, especially if you're trying to build an innovation team out of your IT organization, is to go for your top technical folks. And I think there's a place for them, and we have a couple of geniuses on my team who can make and create anything. But you also have to be careful, I think, that that's not always the best role, especially for maybe, you know, the leaders of a team like that. You really need somebody who also can be connecting very disparate dots and seeing how you can leverage something from one business and use it in a slightly different way at another business, or take things from other industries and move it forward. You know, it really shouldn't be about, I think, the technology as much as it should be around what business problem are you trying to solve, what opportunity are you trying to create, and how can you, if this is in IT, use IT technology as a means to really, you know, achieve those goals. So I think that's one thing to consider. You know, avoid the ladder climbers. I think there's a real risk when you bring somebody in who's very focused in on his steps of his career, his or her career, because there's a real amount of risk around innovation. And if you're always looking for your next promotion, your next step up, there's a real tendency to maybe be beholden to leadership. If leadership starts to push back on something, then you might quickly drop it and move on to something else because that's detrimental to your career. So you really almost need people who are a little bit more idealistic and ready and passionate about driving something different and not so concerned about the short-term results to them in their career. So something to be considered there. I think, there's real persistence too. This poor guy pushing the boulder is how it's felt for the last 3 or 4 years as we've been pushing Hospital of the Future forward at Medtronic. There was several times where I was told, basically, you really should consider shutting that down and moving on to something else. You're killing your career with this, and this isn't going to go anywhere. Medtronic's not interested. Get the hint and move on. There's a fine line, I think, between being persistent, stubborn, and being stupid. But for whatever reason, I kept pushing, and we got a team that was very passionate about what we were doing, and we just knew because of all the customer inputs that we had from all those tours that we had something real here that they were very anxious to do and that they really wanted and they couldn't find anywhere else. So we continued pushing, and we're at the point now where the Hospital of the Future and some of the components of it are in very serious consideration for commercialization at Medtronic as a new revenue stream, new revenue source. So I think we've been fairly successful and very lucky, I think, of taking the early concept and pushing it all the way through. But over 3 to 4 years, it took a lot of different approaches, a lot of different studies, a lot of different types of resources, and a lot of different types of work to really get it to that point. So persistence is a huge piece of the puzzle that you need to make sure you have in there. And I think the other thing is just look for those guys or women who don't quite fit in. You have them, we all do. They're the ones asking the oddball questions. They're the ones that you give them instructions, and they get it done, but they do it in a completely different way than you asked them to do it. And you kind of get a little irritated with them, and you can think, why can't they just follow instructions? Those are maybe the ones that you want on an innovation team, the people who are always looking at things a little bit differently. And I think the other thing is, find people from different backgrounds. I think that's a really important piece. Renee, my first follower employee, she has a poli-sci background, recruited her fresh out of college. She's been amazing. And she's not only really innovative, she just knows how to get things done and how to work, the big machine of Medtronic to really get things pushed forward. Tom Schultz, who you could see in the background, he came out of our business, so he doesn't have an IT background, but he's an electronic health record expert and really worked on some of the clinical systems that Medtronic had. So he brings in a real specific expertise, and that's been very helpful to our team as we start looking at hospitals and how we integrate and move data forward. So find these people with different backgrounds and really figure out how then to weld them together into a fully functioning team. The other thing that we noticed too is you want really ambitious people. You want people who are really passionate and hard driving and excited, but you also got to make sure you have people who share. There's a book called Innovating at the Speed of Laughter, and there's a comedy troupe, and they go out and they help teach innovation at large companies, and they make some real good comparisons between driving innovation and improv comedy. But one of the premises is you need a team who always takes an idea in a positive way and builds off of that idea. It can be the funniest thing in the world for improv comedy for a really brilliant line to be thrown out that completely destroys the storyline, but it's very funny, but then there's no place to go from there. And so what we found is sometimes we had very ambitious people that wanted to be on the team, but they wanted to hoard the information. They wanted to grab ideas and run with it to make themselves look good. And what it does is it quickly shuts down a team like that, and no one's able and willing to share ideas. And you want a team who's able to have fun and really share ideas and concepts openly with no fear of losing control or somebody else grabbing it or somebody else getting the glory. It needs to be about the team, not the individuals. So I think you've got to be really careful about picking people that fit. I think a lot of when we do interviews for my innovation team, is more in my mind around the personality of the person than it is necessarily about the technical skills or backgrounds that they bring to the table. So those are some of the things that we understood or realized, I guess I would say, that worked for us and might be helpful to you as you may be thinking about this also. This is actually my last slide, so I think I went a little bit quicker than expected, but that's good. It leaves us a little bit of time for Q&A, hopefully. One of the things that we also realized with Hospital of the Future, it was a real blessing because it opened doors for us that we weren't expecting, but also was a bit of a curse. We had a real risk of becoming a one-trick pony. There for the slide. And I think we were so tied to the concept, and we took so much time and energy to drive that concept forward that everybody just kind of started knowing us as the Hospital of the Future team. And the real fear was if that went down in flames, so would the whole team. And I think, we worked really hard to diversify from that set of solutions. We're still pushing that forward, and I think we were very close to having a real success there from a commercial standpoint. But we quickly wanted to build out other solutions too outside the hospital space. So for example, we started doing a lot of work within the data area, taking device data and starting to combine it with other sources of data so that we can better manage patients. We started looking at healthcare, where things are now moving from acute care to post-acute care, from pay for service to bundled payments. Accountable care organizations are being created in healthcare. So hospitals are now going to be incented to keep people out of the hospital. That's a complete big change for them. And with our diagnostics, our sensors, our therapeutic devices, we believe there's a real place that Medtronic can play now in that space of helping keep patients out of the hospital by better monitoring them, better keeping track of their health, better alerting them before they come into the emergency room and cost that hospital a lot of money. And so we're developing out those solutions and building early prototypes around that. In fact, we added on a room to the Hospital of the Future recently that's now called our Clinic of the Future. And it's a little bit of a home of the future too. And it's all around the patient and the physician's office and what types of solutions can we bring forward around data and better management of patients outside of a traditional hospital setting. I think the other thing that's changed for us, and a little bit around the success we had with Hospital of the Future, was that was a push. We were coming up with our own ideas, our own concepts, and kind of trying to push them onto the business. And there's a little bit of resistance to that. The not invented here syndrome comes into play. Why is IT pushing ideas like this? Shouldn't that be coming from the business? We pay for you guys to keep our printers up and going. We don't pay for you to do this, So that type of attitude came out quite often. But over time, because of the tours, because of the feedback, and because of some of the success we started having, it started moving to a little bit more of a pull model. And I think that's really going to help us really avoid some of that institutional resistance that I talked about earlier. Now the business leaders are coming to us saying, we have a very specific problem. Would your team be interested in working with us to come up with innovative ideas of how to do this? Recently I sent two of my guys off to Stanford Design School. So we start really getting much more discipline and methodology around the Stanford Design methodology. And now we're going to use that back with our businesses so that we can start holding design sessions with our businesses around very specific ideas to really help garner that partnership with our businesses. So the more that we get that executive sponsorship for our team, I think the more we'll have a little bit of air cover from an executive standpoint, and kind of the legitimizes us a little bit to be working in some of the spaces. Recently my team has also changed its name. That was asked for us to change it from IT innovation to healthcare innovation. So I think now is also getting a little bit more recognized that this is the space we own and where we're putting in our energy and our time, and where we've developed a lot of expertise. And we found now we're getting called in quite often around mergers and acquisitions within the hospital space because of the expertise that we built on this team. So I think just by us starting to develop out ideas and concepts and moving in certain directions has opened up other opportunities within the company to help and move other things forward that are kind of tangential to what we're doing. So that's kind of where my story ends, where we're at today. I think we have a little bit of time left for Q&A, and if there's any questions, please let me know. Yes?
First of all, what a great presentation. The question I have is, I think you indicated Medtronic had about 2,900 employees in the R&D organization. Could you describe the relationship that you have with IT innovation in partnership with the R&D organization at Medtronic?
Sure, thanks. It's a good question. So a lot of the things that we're doing is close to, overlaps a little bit with the R&D organization because they're mostly focused in on devices and the therapies. But a lot of our devices and therapies have data coming from them, and that's really where we partner with them. We had an opportunity. Had the opportunity to be on one of our core product development teams, a core team for them. I think it was the first time they told us that an IT person's ever been asked to be on one of those core teams. One of my mad scientists in the closet team members, he was just put into the Medtronic Technical Fellows group. First time ever an IT person has been put into the Technical Fellows group, there's only been 200 of them in the whole history of Medtronic. So I think we're building bridges there and we're working with them. I think the other thing that really helped us too, as we built that Hospital of the Future, they saw this, a lot of our engineers, as a showcase for their own ideas and their own concepts. And so we really embraced them and said, yeah, bring it in. If you have a new device concept, we can put it into the hospital of the future and start showing other future ideas a little bit more traditionally to Medtronic. And I think that opened a lot of doors for us too, where they're now starting to call us on a more regular basis, say, can you work with us? Or, we need somebody to help us with this piece. A little bit more willing to give us some of the IT that they would have tried to do on their own, or get us involved with other aspects that have nothing to do with IT. So still early stages, but I think it's happening and it's moving, and I'm feeling good that we're building some real inroads there.
I have one that follows on to the previous question. How are you also including your mainstream IT organization to ensure that they feel included in your findings, and that you're not just doing all the fun stuff and they're stuck doing the day-to-day operational?
It's a great question, and it's a real risk that we've faced. So a couple of things. I think it has helped build a little bit of more of an innovative spirit across the Medtronic IT organization. But it takes some real work, because there is sometimes that risk that my team has seen as, you guys are just having fun, you're not really doing anything hard, we're all here working hard on everything else. I think part of it is just they don't quite understand what it takes and to drive innovation forward. But about half of my team members actually came out of the IT organization, and kind of going back to that recruiting slide for a second, it was those people who came to me and said, I have a normal job, I'm busy, but I have weekends and I have evenings free. I would love to work with you on some of the things you're trying to do. And that passion that they showed and that expertise they brought to the table, I was able to suck a few of them into my team full time. We've also kind of worked out a deal with some of the IT leaders to say, let's make time available for some of your experts so that they can work with us on some of our IT concepts. I'd rather use internal resources than go outside and get them. And so, it's tight budgets for us like everybody else in IT, but we've still been able to carve out a certain percentage of time for enough people to really help us on our projects, so they feel they're a little bit more included, a little bit more involved. We did try another thing that didn't really turn out too well. I'd like to try it again, maybe with a twist, was opening up like an idea system so people could send their ideas in from the IT organization. Two things we found was we got flooded with ideas, and my team was so small we didn't know how to actually. We would spend all of our days just working through the ideas, and a lot of them were very, very technical, great ideas, but really within their disciplines and what they were trying to do. So I think there needs to be good formal ways that you include the IT organization in, and how you build those bridges so you don't get that real delta. But I think we're making some successes there, but we still can do better there, and we're still kind of working on it, trying to figure and feel our way into that.
Any other questions?
All right. You let me off easy.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you, Paul, for an amazing presentation. Can we all give him a round of applause?